Welcome to Postpartum. We're excited to talk to you. This last episode was definitely, I don't want to call it a heavier topic because I didn't feel like I left with my heart wrenched, but it was
important.
Yeah, it was important. I was going to say it was a more sincere one, but I also don't feel like other ones aren't sincere. But anyway.
It was just a lot of information that people need to know. Whereas,
yeah.
I mean, we have a lot of that as well, but this is big. So
yeah. So we hope that that as you listeners listen to Chante talk, you were able to listen with an open heart, because I know that it can be really hard, no matter what your cultural or ethnic heritage is. It can be really easy to feel defensive. I know that I felt a little bit of apprehension going into it, even though we've talked to Chante beforehand. I won't speak for you, Jess, but I felt nervous that I would say something stupid. It took me like 5 tries to say the intro because I was like, what do I say about you? And she's like, she didn't say it this way, but I felt like she was like, just don't make it weird and it won't be weird. And I'm like, okay, so let me be weird.
Like, say whatever.
Yeah, she was awesome about it. And hard. I was like,
yeah, I found myself really thinking hard about phrasing when I was trying to ask a question. And you know, it's difficult to not say the words and the terms that are going to be offensive. And a lot of people are saying if you're doing it from a place of love and understanding, then it's going to be good. And if you know, that you are going to mess up and that people may point out that you've messed up, and you need to acknowledge that and apologize if necessary and move forward. And, and I'm getting all that, but it's still, you know, you still have that feeling. And even after we finished recording, I had that feeling in the pit of my stomach that like, oh my gosh, did I say something that was going to be offensive? Just questioning. And I'm so glad that we did it. And I don't regret doing it at all. I think it's really important. But, you know, I think as a white person who's trying to pursue this, you just maybe need to get used to that feeling for a bit, if that's the feeling that you have.
Yeah, you're going to be uncomfortable with it, and that's okay. I thought she was so loving, though.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she is someone that I think I would feel confident going to with questions.
Mm-hmm.
She just, whereas there are some people I see on social media, and honestly, I'm so scared because I feel like if I mess up with what I say, or if I go to them and I say, hey, I have this question, it's like, you should know this. And I'm like, I know I should know this, but I don't.
Yeah.
And I hear so many things from every direction that are, and that's the tricky thing is you really, unless you're wanting to go down a deep rabbit hole with a lot of opinions, it's hard. It's hard to navigate through all the junk and get to what is real and what is authentic for you and what's going to be helpful instead of detrimental.
Well, and I think a lot of people are coming from a place of rage, which is completely understandable if they are experiencing this and it is
from both
maddening.
sides.
Yes. It's maddening and it's very, I don't want to say easy, but natural to come from that place of exhaustion and rage. And why do I have to explain this to you? This has been generations and, like...
Why haven't you listened?
Right. And that's totally understandable. But I appreciate when people do come at it from a place of patience and love, because I feel like that's much more inviting. I feel like a lot of people can get turned off by the rage. Like if you're just constantly seeing it and you're like, you know what, if I can't do anything right, then I'm not going to do anything at all. And
this is like what we were just talking about in our last episode.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't mean to belittle anyone else's, I don't mean to be like, oh, you're comparing it, but it's the same common communication patterns that invite or push away.
Right. And I want to be engaged. I want to learn and I want to grow and improve. And it's just easier. It's just easier when you have someone who is understanding, who can help you through it or guide you to the resources. I actually did see something on social media that was very helpful. That was kind of like saying, Black people are exhausted. They've been fighting this fight for so long. They're exhausted. They don't want to hold your hand and carry you through this. And so if you want to do it, here's a list of TV shows, documentaries, movies. Here's a list of books. Here's a list of podcasts. You know, go out and read what other Black people have put down for your education that's already out there. And I kind of felt bad reaching out to Chante, being like my one and only Black friend at this moment. I think I've had some in the past, but I haven't talked to them in a while. But, you know, like, oh, there's this thing going on. I'm going to reach out to you. And that's probably why her and her sister have gotten so many people reaching out to them, because they're like, hey, you're Black, help me with this.
Well, they're also kind.
They're very kind.
Yeah.
And they, you know, developed Let's Talk Sis so they could spread that message and educate. And I so appreciate that. But there are other resources. Like, we can do our own work because it's out there.
For sure. I think that because they have come out and said, hey, we want to educate, I think that's part of the reason why as well. Because I have other Black friends that I know that have said that they're not interested in talking about this. And so I'm not going to reach out to them with questions because they've said they're not interested. What I don't like, what is hard for me, is when one person speaks on behalf of their entire race, saying things like Black people are exhausted. We have been fighting this battle for years and we don't want to hold your hand. There are some people who are not exhausted by this. They are fired up. They are revved up. They're ready to go. And the people who need direction, they're happy to send the resources. Those are the people you reach out to. And that's a misconception for me. I read things like that and I am like, I need to back away from this because I don't know what is right to do. I don't know if I should text you and ask if you're okay. I don't know if I should post or not post. I don't know, you know what I mean? Like, take those messages as that person speaking on behalf of themselves. And absolutely read those resources. Absolutely take the resources, go research them and look into the facts, check all the facts on everything you're reading the best you can, because there's a lot of misconceptions out there. But I do think it's still okay to reach out. Just reach out to people that want to be reached out to.
That are open to it.
Yeah. Reached out to, is that how you say it? I don't know. Is that wrong?
I think so.
Okay, good. One thing I was going to talk about that I thought was so interesting was you talked about, Brittany, how if your child goes up and says something that's wrong to someone, to a Black person, someone of color, and like, how do you prevent that? And I don't know. I thought on that a lot, and I thought, how do I teach beforehand? And I don't think you can address all of the socially unacceptable things our kids are going to do.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, but you're absolutely right with that. All the possibilities of things that they're going to say that are not wrong or that are wrong. Like my nephew came, and this is a different example. Way off. I was in high school. He came up to me and he's like, "Hey, I don't know if you know this, but you can shave your mustache." And I was like, "Oh, your parents failed you. They didn't." But you don't think to tell your child, "Hey, don't tell girls they can shave their mustache."
Right.
There are so many things that kids are good.
You might not have thought of saying this, but let me tell you something you could say, and then don't say
it. Yes. But I think it is more about how we react to those situations, right? So, so if my and understanding their level of comprehension, right? If my Emmett, my 1-year-old, goes up and touches a Black girl's hair, there's nothing I'm going to be able to say to him that's going to make him understand that that's not okay to do.
Right.
But if my 5-year-old, if Emmett is a 5-year-old and goes up and touches a Black person's hair, I'm going to say, "Hey, this is not okay to do." And you can try to educate before, but I also think it can be really overwhelming for little kids to try to analyze different social settings and say, "Okay, is this going to be acceptable to do to this person? Or is this okay to talk about? Is this an okay question to ask?" So it's more about how we respond when we see something that is not okay. That's my 2 cents. Yeah, and that's how I'll parent. I will do my best to educate them about race. I will do my best to educate them about slavery and about our history as a white person, my husband's history as a Latino, and Black history as well. But at the same time, I have to understand that kids are going to do things wrong.
Well, and they notice, they think in patterns. I think we talked about that. They are going to notice those differences, and they're going to point out those differences. And in the book that I talked about that I'm reading, Raising White Kids, she actually talks about that specific scenario where if you're in a grocery store and your toddler or your small child points at a Black person in line and says, "Mom, look how dark her skin is." You can react one of two ways. And traditionally you react in the embarrassed way, in the hushed, like don't point, don't say that, whatever. And you just ignore the situation. But a better way to act then is to teach and also, I can't think of the right word, but, make it a positive experience. Yeah. Like, it's not nice to point, but yes, her skin is dark and beautiful. Like, make it like a positive thing. Like, you're noticing that difference. Yeah. Not that you're ignoring it, because it's not to be shamed. You are ashamed for your child to be doing this thing that's embarrassing, whatever. But what it comes off to the child is that person is something to be shameful of, or that thing that they've done is something to be shameful of. And you want to kind of, I guess, steer them away from that. So it was an interesting, point of view and passage, and it seems like common sense, but there's a lot of this that seems like common sense, but we just don't think of it because it's so either ingrained in us or just a natural instinct, right? Our natural instinct when your kid calls somebody fat is to just be like, like you just don't want to address it because it's embarrassing. But she even talked about too in the book, like, if the situation calls for it, address the person, like the Black person, the stranger, whatever it is, apologize if it needs to be apologized for. And that is something that's just scary to me because I'm such an introverted person, and I wouldn't talk to a stranger in line for any reason if I could help it. But it's something that's going to be healthier in the long run. So yeah, I appreciated reading that and learning that.
And I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. I talked a lot in the episode, so you
go. I was just gonna say, I think one, and correct me if you guys disagree with this, but I would, in an ideal setting, if I'm like prepared and on my A game, try to minimize and normalize the difference. So, saying things like, yeah, that person has darker skin. They have more melanin in their skin, and that's how God made them. They have more melanin, and that's what makes their skin darker. That's just how God makes them. Like, your hair is darker than mommy's hair. Mommy's hair is blonde. That's how God made my hair. Just kidding, I dye my hair. But when I was a kid, at one point in my life, I was blonde, and just not making it like, I don't know, this huge thing that makes them seem different and seem separated from us. Just saying, hey, that's how God made their skin, and it's skin just like yours and mine.
I love that.
And it's easy to do, I think, to that exposure, like books, movies, television shows, dolls, all the things that Chante was mentioning some, but just having those in your home is a good start, because then it's not so shocking when they're out and about and they actually see. And especially us being from Utah, if we didn't do that, I feel like it would be very shocking, because it's not going to be a more common occurrence, I guess. Like me growing up in California, it was a pretty common occurrence to see someone of a different nationality, of a different race. It's just very diverse out there. But here in Utah, it's like, I don't know, white central in this state.
I want to mention, I'm sorry again. Sorry. No. I just wanted to mention a couple things. Hopefully I'll be able to articulate this, because they're more of free-floating ideas. But I was talking to Phil recently about some, I guess for like a better word, biases. We were just kind of identifying those that we had. And it was really, I think, healthy experience. We weren't like, and yeah, let's keep that bias, but it was a vulnerable time because obviously, for most people, I don't think they want their spouse. It's like the person that you should be the most vulnerable with, right? And so I just kept being like, don't think I'm terrible, but. And I said, I just want you to know, because I think it's important that I identify those things, because I wouldn't even have thought of talking, like explaining. I would have probably responded much like you were talking about, Jess, with the more embarrassed and just be like, I'm sorry, but what am I sorry for? My child pointing at a person. And like, if my child said, look at that woman in her beautiful tan, I'm like, I'm so sorry. Your spray tan is great, but they did not need, like, I don't think that they'd be like, thanks. And so it's just like you're saying, like, what is there, like, it's a bad thing. And so,
yeah.
So anyway, we were talking about those things, and I thought it was good, one, so we kind of knew where we were at. And then two, we both more or less put them on the table so we knew kind of what we were willing to overcome and what was a struggle for us right now, but we're not, it's not that we're not willing to work on them, but maybe we're not quite ready for kind of things. And so I think that that's a good thing and an important thing. And then, continuing the conversation, I think, can be scary because of what you were saying at the beginning of this postpartum, how, Codee, that it feels like it feels shameful to me a lot of the time. And I've never really voiced the biases that I had. But I think it can help me overcome them by, like, it's just like when you're afraid of, like, my therapist taught me that when I'm trying to avoid something, it's probably going to pop up more. If I'm really afraid of an interaction, or if something's haunting me, bad memories haunting me, no wonder it pops up everywhere, because I'm not confronting it. And so that was kind of like the association that I had with it, that it's okay to be human because we didn't know any different. Yeah. But it's even better to then repent. And I don't want to use that word too religiously, but I mean, like, that's what it means, is to change, right? And to become better. And that's what I think should be our goal as the human race.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, I think the most eye-opening experience from everything that's happening, in the nation and in the world right now, is those microaggressions, which I'd heard that term before, but I didn't really give it much stock. But I think the more we can, because I personally I feel like I would never call the cops on a Black person for just being Black, right? For just walking or whatever. I feel like I wouldn't, and I definitely wouldn't do any, hate crimes. I wouldn't call any names. I wouldn't do anything active like that. So, like I said in the episode, I would not consider myself racist. But there are so many just natural inclinations to those microaggressions that are classified or can be classified as racist. And I think that everyone, all white people everywhere, could benefit from just learning more of those. And I like in this book that I'm reading that she is actually bringing those situations up. And she's saying, like, in this specific situation, our natural inclination is to act this way. However, that's a microaggression. We can act this way to be more positive, to raise our kids better. And I just feel like it's so natural. There's so many things that are just natural and horrible, and that makes me feel terrible that they're so natural, but they're there. And learning about them and acknowledging them and, like, preparing yourself, I guess, to combat them in a different way is the most beneficial thing, I think, for me that I'm taking away from all of this.
Did you have something else, Codee?
No, nothing else. I liked what she said about having diverse books and toys for your kids to play with. I thought that was a highlighted point. I had one question that wasn't answered. I thought you guys would cover it. I don't know why I thought you guys would cover it, but I don't know if you want to talk about it in the postpartum. It may be something that's better to talk to Chante about. I could mention it here though.
We can always edit this ending part if we need to.
It is using the N-word. Not white people using the N-word.
Right.
Black people using the N-word. I saw on social media, another friend of mine talked about Black people using the N-word and how it is okay for them because they're reclaiming the word And I struggle with that concept myself because I think about a child's understanding of that, right? I think about if my son comes home from elementary school and says the N-word, and I explain to him that's not an okay word to say. And he says, well, my friend who's black says this word. And I haven't heard something yet that makes me feel confident or comfortable telling my child that because of the color of his skin, he can't do or say something.
Right.
I don't know. And I'm sure there's an explanation. I just have not heard one yet that is like, okay, that makes sense. To me, that is separation. That is making a big deal of his race, right? And that is him not being allowed to do things because of his race for whatever reason. That's the bottom line for me.
Right.
And I hate that. I hate that it's going to cause him to think that the color of his skin, the color of anyone's skin, makes a difference in what they're allowed to do and say.
Mm-hmm.
And so I struggle with that. And I want to understand. I want to be able to explain to him in a way that's not going to make him feel like it's because of his race. You know what I mean?
asked her, you might have heard this, I don't know if Phil edited whatever this out, but I had, cause I told him I was going on kind of about cultural appropriation, and that kind of to me falls in that, like,
Yes.
it's still very difficult for me to understand that. And I know that, Jess, you talked about Sarah's day and the braids and how she was saying she wore these braids that were colored. I don't know if you know who that is, Codee, but and everybody was saying she should have known better, and I didn't understand why. And I messaged Jess and said, does the African community have a market on braids? I don't understand.
Yeah.
You know, and like apparently it's the colored braids or something. I don't know,
because the colored
it's like,
braids.
yeah, because I thought.
But yeah, I did actually
know.
some research on the braids after that incident because I really wanted to know, like, are they just claiming this because it's popular? But no, the oldest record of braids does come from Africa. There are, obviously like Vikings and stuff, Nordic civilizations braided their hair, but it was in a different way. And specifically the way that Sarah had her hair for her campaign or whatever, the braids that she had and the color that she used, actually. She tried to match the color to her activewear collection, but the specific color was very similar to what a lot of Black women use to color their hair. So it's to me, I don't understand a lot of it either. I think it's difficult. I think the Halloween costume thing, I get. Blackface, I get.
Yeah.
But then there's like, I've had Indian friends who have given us like traditional Indian, saris, is that what they're called and stuff? Uh-huh. And if you go to a function that an Indian person is throwing, like a wedding or something, and you're white and you wear one, it's not insulting. So like, there's a lot of gray in that. I think there's a lot of gray in that, and it depends on who you're with and what you're trying to communicate. But I think when you were talking about that, the N-word as well, like cultural appropriation came to my mind also, that we want to be respectful, but
yeah, I don't want to be disrespectful, and I don't think, in my opinion, right now, with my level of education, my understanding, I don't think anyone should say the word. I think if it is used as a derogatory term, it should not be used by anyone. And that's my opinion. And I want to understand. I also want to understand cultural appropriation, because right now, if my daughter came up to me and she was like, I think braids are beautiful, I love the way they look, can we get my hair braided? I would struggle to tell her, you cannot do that because of the color of your skin.
Right.
Yeah.
That's just hard for me as a mom to justify to my child.
I thought I just had about what you were saying about the N-word is how some people say like beesies to each other, like
yeah.
hey,
The
you know,
I
I know, but that's what I mean. Like if my husband, well, maybe not my husband, but if some guy came and said that who's not like in my circle, like if we said that to each other and then somebody else came, I don't know if everybody else would feel this way, but I can imagine that some spheres would be like, excuse you don't call me that, or whatever. Like I used to get all over people who would call girls chicks. I'd be like, are you dating her? Are you she is not a chick. You say something nice, and they're probably like, what are you, a Karen? But I just was like, so appalled that they would like say something so, in my opinion, derogatory, as saying like a chick. I don't care that much anymore. But at the time of my life, I was like, she's not just a whatever that you can whatever. And so I was thinking like, but if my friend's like, hey chick, I'm not like, you don't know me, like I don't get all up and whatever. And so it's just sort of like situational. And even though, like you said, you don't like, my first example either, some people have no problem with it, but I don't think they'd want everybody calling that. Yeah. And I don't know the answer because I'm struggling as well, knowing what's, cultural appropriate. Because your example, the saris, I shared in the episode with my sister and having some kimonos, and she was like, it's just not appropriate for me to wear them. And I was like, oh, it's not? Okay, I don't know. Yeah. And so...
Yeah,
I don't know. It's kind of like, I guess if you don't know, then don't do it. But
I feel like for a lot of this stuff right now, and we can edit this out if this is not in line.
You can edit all of this out.
Yeah,
this
all of
more of
this
just
maybe
me having a raw moment of maybe just
That's
not
fine.
being enlightened, but I really struggle with that concept.
I just have this opinion that Black people have been oppressed for so long, and this happened with American Indians as well, that like when we get to a point where we no longer want them to be oppressed, we want them to be equal, they can't just come from being oppressed for centuries and then be equal. Mm-hmm. They have to be above. They have to be for just to level it out. I mean, it's like the difference between, people being against the Black Lives Matter and saying all lives matter. Well, no, Black Lives Matter right now because that's what we need to focus on. We need them to have their time. We need them to reclaim their power. We need them. We don't want to say, oh, well, everyone's equal. Well, everyone is and should be and eventually, hopefully, will be. But just saying, you've been 5 steps behind all of us. You just need to take 5 steps to be equal with us, I feel like is not as empowering. And so I've seen this with a lot of movements, a lot of changes over the years. Like we need to, and it's the Me Too movement as well, and women's rights. We've had to push really hard, and I say we because I'm a woman, but I didn't actually do anything. Women,
we're tired too.
Women have had to push really hard, and are still pushing hard. And even though I think we're considered equal in a lot of areas, we still need to get to a place of power where we feel like we've been given back something that was taken from us. And then once we have gotten that, I think we can level out and we can become more equal. And I feel like that's true for the Black community as well. And I hate to say that as a white person, if I'm wrong, any Black person can correct me, but I feel like it's okay. The cultural appropriation and Black Lives Matter and trying to take that power back, I feel like it's okay for them to do that at this point because they have been oppressed for so long. And then hopefully after they've gotten that power back and we've realized the importance of that particular race, they can equal out. There will be some equilibrium, and then we'll move on to another race because there are so many races and, economic classes and genders. And there's so many inequalities, and we can't focus on all of them, but we focus on one at a time. We learn, we educate, we improve. They get their power back. Eventually one day, maybe after we're all dead, there will be some equality. So I'm personally okay with, if people say it's not appropriate for you to do this because of the color of your skin, I'm personally okay with that at this point because I do have a lot of privilege because of the color of my skin, and I don't need to fight for that. If that's something that makes them feel powerful, they can have that because they should feel powerful. They should feel special in that way, whatever, because they have had a lot of oppression. That's just my personal opinion. Yeah. Probably because it doesn't affect me as much either. Like I don't have a desperate need to wear a kimono. So, I'll let that go. I'm fine with that. If that's what's going to make them happy and feel better, then I'm good.
I am as well. And I definitely agree with you when it comes to opportunities. I just still will struggle. Mm-hmm. I need to figure out a good way to explain to my children why they can't do these things without just saying it's because you're white.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I can still explain that I can talk about slavery, I can talk about oppression, and it will still boil down to, in my opinion, because of the color of their skin.
Mm-hmm. Maybe though you could shift it to not say because they're white, it's because they're not black. Because I don't know if it's a target against white. Maybe it is, but maybe if somebody that was Latino, or which I mean, like Emmett is Latino, right? I mean, so I just mean like, so that's kind of what I mean. Like, you know, I don't know if somebody was Asian, if they could have worn braids either or said the N-word. Like, I don't know that it is against whites. It could be because of everything, but I just think that might be, maybe not, maybe it'd be easier just to kind of focus on like, that's their thing, not your thing.
But that's what I hate. That's what I hate. That it's their thing. It's their thing. It's making them different. It's exclusive. And I hate that. I hate that. I would rather, and again, I hate it because I don't understand it. And still with these explanations, I totally understand that black people, many black people have been 5 steps behind because of what my ancestors did. And I'm all about giving opportunities for them to get where, you know, funding for programs that will help them come out of oppression. It's more, I don't see that as dividing. I don't see that as exclusive, but limiting white people's ability to do what they want with their hair, or to say things that are okay for other races to say, that to me is still really tricky.
I think that's fair. I think it's difficult because we live in America and we're talking about black people in America and we're saying the color of their skin, but it's a culture. It's a cultural difference. And like, if you look at people in Africa who go around wearing nothing but a loincloth, or they have like, you know, giant rings in their noses or their ears or whatever, like that's a cultural thing. And if my daughter was like, well, you know, these girls in Africa don't have to wear clothes, so I don't want to wear clothes to school. It's like, well, you can't do that because that's a different culture. It's not because you're not black. It's because you don't live in that culture. And so that might be an easier way to say.
It's a better way than what I said.
To say, you know, there are cultural differences and we can admire them and we can learn about them and we can think, oh, that's so cool. But we also need to be aware of and proud of our culture, whatever that is. And it's difficult, I think, for white people in America because we don't necessarily have a culture. I mean, I'm sure we do, but you know, it's like accents too. Like, you know, all accents are cooler. We still have an accent, but you know, it's just kind of basic. So I think that, like, I think I asked Chante about that too. Like, how do you have your kids be proud of being black, but also not ashamed of being white? And so I think promoting culture in general and learning about culture in general, but like being secure in your own race and your own culture can help as well. It still doesn't eliminate the problem. There still is that racial divide there. And it is much more difficult when you live in the same area and you're like, well, we go to the same school and we live in the same neighborhood. Why can't we say the same things? Yeah. Because it's a different culture.
Yeah. And I see where you're coming from. I think it's still tricky that if my kids wanted to take a hula class, they could take a hula class and wear a hula skirt and not have it be a problem. Or if they wanted to buy chopsticks and put them in their hair, they could do that. But they couldn't have braids. You know what I mean? Like, there's still gonna be this thing where it's like, oh, you can embrace other people's cultures, but not black people. Mm-hmm. They are the exception. They are the different ones. And so you don't get to be a part of their club because of the color of your skin.
And they're hurt right now. I think that's some of the difference too, is like the Polynesian culture is not necessarily oppressed or hurt or put down for that particular part of their culture. So, I mean, and maybe that's part of the difference. And I totally agree with you on everything that you're saying, but I think that may be part of the difference too. Like if a person is hurting because of something, you don't necessarily want to, you know, engage them in, you know, some of their actions because they're hurting right now. So you want to be careful of that and you want to be kind, you know, whatever. So that that's maybe some approach to it as well.
But I think it's fair that it's tricky.
It
and
is.
That's still
It's so
valid.
tricky.
Like,
It's very.
It's going to
Yeah.
be a hard conversation for me to navigate with with a child. I think that's the one conversation where I'm like, can someone else take over?
Maybe ask.
And maybe
let's
in
talk
5
sis.
years it'll be different.
Yeah. Yes.
Like, I don't know, but hopefully.
I really do. I hope and I genuinely pray that at some point we can get to a place where that won't be an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's my understanding or whether it's our society changes and we make some progress and some fixes and mend some wounds.
Thank you so much for listening to our postpartum. We really appreciate you guys tuning in.